guys enjoyed it and learned something. And you can take it again next semester. I'll be teaching it, me personally, for the next 2 semesters. And then Augustine's going to take it over after I leave, after I graduate. We try and bring in all new speakers, so it'll be really different. So yeah, I encourage you to take it again. And today we have our last speaker. This is John Roulac. He's the CEO of Nativa and the founder. It's the world's leading organic superfoods brand of hemp, coconut, chia, and red palm superfruit. If you've taken this class, I believe a few of you might have heard him, but I really like him to finish off the class because he ties a lot into sustainability and climate change, and his company is a really awesome one, and he's someone that I think really highly of. So we're really lucky to have him finishing the course. So if we can welcome him to class, please.
Thanks, everybody. How are you doing tonight? Good. So some of you may not know, but we're based here in Richmond, California, just a few miles away. Quick question: how many people have eaten a Nativa product or bought it? A couple. Okay, that's not bad. I think we did a survey and we found 4% of households in America have used our product. So, like we think we can get to 20%. So I'm going to talk a little about some environmental things. I'm going to talk just real briefly about politics for a moment. I know politics was it's a big issue here in the Berkeley campus, or not, depending on your viewpoint. And then we're going to talk a little more about entrepreneurship. And I guess part of the challenge is, when you're an entrepreneur, what do you do with challenges and defeat and those kind of things. So I'll tell you a little some of the things that I've had to deal with along the ways. I founded Nativa with 500 hemp bars in 1999, and now we have 115 employees, and we're about 20,000 stores around North America, and also some in Asia and Europe as well. So this first thing we're going to show, let's see, do you want to?
I can get the lights.
Yeah, get the lights maybe. This is something called marine permaculture, and it's essentially, this is a guy named Brian von Herzen. He's like a science ocean guy, and he has a way to help restore the oceans. And so this isn't available yet on YouTube. It's just a couple-minute overview. It's really interesting. The Bill Gates Foundation has backed him, and just recently read about, and it's featured in Paul Hawkins' new book as one of the solutions, the top solutions for climate change.
The oceans store 90% of global warming today.
It's all backwards on here. It's good.
99% of the ocean is in fact an aquatic desert. The oceans store 90% of global warming today. And it's storing that heat in the surface of the ocean in a thick, warm layer of water that actually is causing the problem. It's shutting down the currents that go from the deep up to the surface. And when we shut down those currents, we shut down the food source for the plankton. I first had the idea for marine permaculture when I was studying the plankton of the oceans, and I was amazed that half the oxygen we breathe comes from the plankton of the oceans. And it's the plankton forests and the kelp forests that we have to restore in addition to our land forests to really balance the earth and balance carbon in the Earth's atmosphere. Kelp forests are one of the most miraculous ecosystems on Earth. The kelp forest and the kelp species of Macrocystis is the fastest growing tree on Earth. It can grow nearly 0.5 meters per day. These kelp forests are the fastest growing primary production that we have on the planet. And restoring these kelp forests is an opportunity to create an entire ecosystem. Not only are we restoring primary productivity, but we're creating habitat and food for fish. What we're planning to do is in several phases demonstrate the ability to grow kilometer-scale forests in the middle of the ocean.
So how many people know that before you saw this, that over half the oxygen from the planet comes from the oceans? How many of you like to breathe? So if your generation and our society, especially your generation, because you're going to be in the positions to influence in the next decade or two, if your generation, millennial generation, doesn't change the way the oceans, we don't restore the oceans, by the time you're my age, I'm just turned 58, you're not going to have the oxygen to breathe. So you're gonna start running out of oxygen on this planet. And one of the good thing is even though a lot of the plankton is starting to die, I think in the Indian Ocean they said over 1/3 of the plankton has died in the last 30 years. The oceans, it's because the top part of the ocean is really warm, and also because of ocean acidification. And how is the ocean becoming more acidic? Does anybody know? From the carbon. Where's the carbon coming from? Coming from not only the agriculture, but also industry, and it goes in the atmosphere and then it falls into the oceans, and the oceans are becoming more acidic. And so either if we continue, if I like to say, if we appointed Elon Musk as the emperor for the world, and he was in charge of all energy policies, and he could double technology innovation the way it is now, and he did everything that he could do, and we didn't address agriculture and we didn't address the oceans, what will happen in 2050, 2060? Anybody have any idea? You guys, you want to live in 2050 or 2060, right? You're obviously, you're young, you want to see your future. If we only rely on solar and electric, we're going to have a planet that won't be able to live on biologically with the systems. The good news is we can take all that carbon and we can grow things through it. Just like we've learned how to farm soils and produce a lot of food, but we didn't necessarily pay attention to the carbon in the soil. There's something called regenerative agriculture that about 3 years ago I really started focusing on now. It's becoming very popular. Even the Secretary of Agriculture in France has a whole program on this, and there's a lot of people now, even in the government, and more universities are starting to look at this. So we can take that carbon, we can put it in the soil, and there's more potential to change climate through healing the oceans and soils than there is in wind, solar, and electric cars. But how many people know that? Did you guys ever heard of that before? So it's kind of ironic. You should be the smart ones, right? Isn't Berkeley one of the best schools in the country? It's like one of the greatest countries in the world, America, right? But just a basic biological understanding, you guys just don't even, you haven't been given that information. So that's kind of a little, when you're in school sometimes, in society, you think there's like this free democracy, you think like science is supposed to be empirical, right? Isn't that what we're told? Like if you take a science class, you're like saying, they say, okay, science is unbiased and we're doing all these things, but a lot of powerful market forces influence, and there's a reason why universities like here are not talking about basic biological concepts, or the New York Times, okay? So that's one of the things as you know, when you're young and learning, is don't believe what your professors are only telling you or what you're reading on your Facebook feed, you know. You need to learn to think and kind of hack your own way. It's just like, if you look at like, you think Stephen Jobs, if he just listened to his professors of what they said was supposed to be done, or society, you think he would have invented Apple? You know, he focused on what he was interested in and learned, and that's really important. That's just as a metaphor about the oceans. But we really do need to take care of the oceans. And the interesting thing is the kelp will sequester, let me go ahead and I'm going to pass this book out. The kelp will sequester up to 5 times faster. So the one thing is there's going to be a business opportunity, and this is a book that Paul Hawken wrote, but there's going to be a business opportunity in climate change, because as more people start to wake up to the challenges that we face, and I hope I didn't bum you out by saying, you know, we're going to run out of oxygen by 2050, but that's literally if we destroy the oceans, which is our oxygen system. But if we decide to focus on it, we can change that, you know. But this has 100 of the top solutions to climate change. This gentleman named Paul Hawken, he's written The Ecology of Commerce. If you're interested in business and the environment, I definitely recommend his book, The Ecology of Commerce. So he's got 100 solutions, and this marine permaculture is one of them. And interestingly, one of the top solutions in this one was educating girls and young women. Was one of the top benefits for climate change on a global basis. It wasn't electric cars. Have you ever heard of that before? So it's because if they're more educated, then they can understand some of the life choices they need to make, and that has huge ramifications there. So it's interesting. So that book just came out last week, and my company is one of the companies that sponsored that. They had like 80 researchers from around the world on that. So I want to ask you on politics. First off, how many of you really identify strongly with either the Democratic Party or the Republican Party? Like, you kind of vote that way and you kind of identify with the party politics. I'm just curious, how many, I'm not saying whether Republican or Democrat, but either one, how many, raise your hands, you identify with Republicans or Democrats? Okay, so that's maybe about a quarter, a third. If we were here 10 years ago, that would be like 2/3. You know, it would be a much higher percentage. But independents are really growing. So, you know, full disclosure, I'm independent. I'm not a Republican or Democrat. How many people, when you hear the word Republican and conservative, that's what the thing, right? So the question is, are Republicans really conservative? So one thing one of the things you hear a lot about is that Republicans are fiscally conservative, right? Isn't that a basic thing? They want to balance the budget. So, you know, because, you know, just can kind of give a sense, like over the last 20 or 30 years, when they're out of power and there's a Democrat in, then they really end up being fiscally conservative. They block any bills. They say, you know, if you're gonna have a tax cut, you're gonna have to cut. If you have a tax cut, you have to cut the same amount as the tax cut. You have to be revenue neutral, and they're always focusing on that. And then when they get in power, the same people who've been railing about fiscal conservative, they just put that aside, and there's actually bigger deficits under Republicans. So are they really conservative that way? And then the other thing is, for Democrats, so what Democrats would say, they would say they're progressive, right? Isn't that what you like read? If you listen to the campaigns, right? You know, progressive politics. That's, you know, but yet if you look at the Democratic like the presidency, you know, the presidents and the senators and representatives, what have they supported like over the last 10 or 20 years? There's been lots of regime changes. You know, where we just go into a country and go, the country hasn't done anything to us, and yet we get to make the decision to overthrow the president or whoever's in charge there. We just get to do it because we want to, and the Democrats are supporting that, and they tend to be really aligned with Wall Street, whatever Wall Street wants to do. So, like for example, when we find like pesticides are toxic and can cause birth defects and all these issues, Do you think the Democratic Party is supporting consumer rights to try to get that chemical banned or to have more information on that? So they're not they're not really progressive. So in the ironic way is the Republicans are not conservative and the Democrats are not progressive. But these are like these terms that they throw around that they tell people, and that's part of when you're growing up and you're getting smarter and learning. You need to kind of read through just these kind of headlines and these things called, like, we say in America we have like a free enterprise system, but if you look at agriculture, we have massive subsidies for agriculture. And do we subsidize broccoli or apples, the things that are really good for you? No, we subsidize what's the worst for you that we don't want. Corn and soy. And that leads to more, more health issues. To give you an example, this is a classic. Okay, when the Republicans were controlling Congress and in the House, and when George Bush was president, when there was a pharmaceutical bill. Do you know America is the only country in the world for medicinal drugs, pharmaceutical drugs, that we pay the retail price even though we buy massive quantities? So it's illegal for government agencies, Medicare, Medi-Cal, to tell the pharmaceutical companies, hey, we need like 1 million of these, of these heart medicines every month. It's illegal for them to ask for any discount. They pay the highest price. They can't have any negotiations at all. And yet, in Canada or Mexico or any other countries, they can buy it at big discounts. So why is that happening? That was a conservative government. They're interested in fiscal responsibility, right? But did you ever hear that? Did they ever talk about that in the healthcare bill they're all talking about? You're not really told that. So the idea is just to really zero in and think a little more than just being like, oh, the Republicans are the bad people, or the Democrats. It's a way to divide up, And okay, so that's enough on politics. So I'm going to switch over to a little about being an entrepreneur. But one of the things is when you're an entrepreneur, you have to deal with these issues. Do you think the fact that healthcare costs are up, do you think that impacts as a CEO with 115 people in our company? So our bill just keeps going up, right? The part of it is because we have this dysfunctional medical system. So that's why it's if you're going to be an entrepreneur, you have to deal with that. So I'm going to talk a little about some of the challenges that I've faced and how I deal with that. How many of you want to be how many of you are an entrepreneur? How many of you have even a small business? Maybe raise your hand. Okay, good. And how many of you the rest of you want to be an entrepreneur? Yeah. And I'd just like curious, maybe, why does somebody want to be an entrepreneur? Anybody want to share anything? Why do you want to be an entrepreneur?
I just want to be in charge of my own life and kind of my destiny through that. I don't want to work for anyone else.
That's a good thing. That's definitely and being an entrepreneur, it's one thing to say you want to be an entrepreneur, another thing to do it. So, and the challenge is that you sometimes have to work a lot more when you're an entrepreneur, and when stuff kind of gets tough, you have to dig down and deeper. It's kind of like playing sports, right? The best the best athletes, when they're losing or they're injured, wherever, they gotta go deeper and figure out what do they gotta do to take it to that next level. As an entrepreneur, you need to learn to do that. So not everybody wants to do that. Some people hey, they just at 6 o'clock they go home. Like the people on my team, some people 6 o'clock they just go home. They don't have to worry about it. I'm thinking tomorrow, we got to figure out how to close this deal, and I don't know if we have enough inventory. A customer wants it, and how are we going to deal with that? I might be thinking about that, And sometimes you have people on the team who are not your entrepreneur, but that are just, really involved, and they're still working away. So, we as entrepreneurs, that's good to have that. But by the time I was 12, I had 4 or 5 businesses. So I was a young entrepreneur. So I've been doing it for a long time. So some of the challenges. it depends on the scale. Like a business of like 5 or 10, I can just say, if you want more life satisfaction, unless you really want like to make a lot of money and be like, make a huge impact and, just be kind of like a, an A, you're really kind of an A-type person, you're like an alpha kind of person. Having a business with 10 or 15 people is much easier than having a business with 110, I can just tell you that. Because you can walk around, you know everybody, who they are, and if they don't, and you're not relying on tons of people. But at 100, when we went about 50 or 60 people, like there was people walking around, I didn't know who they were. What are they doing? And if you don't have the right hires in certain places, then they aren't even like connecting with the people on the team, so they're just like wasting their time or not doing the right job, and so it's just more complex. Definitely, that's one thing I've noticed is that a lot of entrepreneurs can be good at 5 or 10 people, 20 people, but when you get to a certain level, it gets to be so. I mean, you looked at Stephen Jobs, he had some challenges running Apple, right? There's, but he was so brilliant, and then he had other people come in and stuff, but definitely there's some challenges. So give you an example of one of the challenges we've had is, on our coconut oil, we put, contains 100% less cholesterol than butter, which is a true fact. Our lawyers said, well, you need to have this little statement that says, contains 13 grams of saturated fat per serving on the front where you do that. And it's like, if it was sunflower oil, you wouldn't have to do that, but the vegetable oil industry like Monsanto is lobbied, so they really hate saturated fat like butter and coconut oil. So they put in this special little thing that makes it harder for the food entrepreneur. So we didn't put that on there, right? And at the time you're going, like if you listen to everything the lawyer does, you'll never get anything done, okay? But now now we've had a lawsuit and some class action lawyers saying, oh, he advertised Facebook. Did anybody buy Nativa coconut oil and did you whatever? And so we never had any complaints of anybody saying, because we've sold like 10 million jars of coconut, more coconut than almost anybody in the world. You'd think someone would call and say, my husband bought this coconut oil, he has a heart attack, he's dead now, how did you do this to me? I mean, you'd think you would get, out of 10 million jars, people would say, we never really got that. But, we're spending $50,000 a month in this lawsuit, and to settle it, they want 4 or 5 million. We don't really have an extra 4 or 5 million to give to these lawyers, So that's an example. As you get bigger, you got more complexities. So just that one little issue. And it's not based on any scientific fact. I mean, I always tell people, if you go to the countries that eat the most coconut oil, like Sri Lanka and Thailand. Anybody been to Sri Lanka or Thailand? You're Sri Lankan?
Yeah.
Okay, so they eat a lot of coconut, right?
Yeah.
Do you see a lot of overweight people there?
No.
No, they're not overweight at all. And same with southern India. And then when they come here, they go, oh, coconut's bad. They start eating the regular diet and then they get overweight. But yet we can have, the ironic thing, you can take like the best medical school at Harvard, and you can take the person who's been studying, they had the most graduate degrees, the most prestige at the college, everybody bows down to him, he's all like, and they will say, coconut oil causes heart disease, it's full of saturated fat, it's a saturated fat, solid fat, it's horrible for you. And when you tell them that, like, well, why is it that the 2 countries in the world that eat the most coconut have the least amount of heart disease, and the countries that eat the most unsaturated fat has the most heart disease? To them, that's not evidence. And they go to this, and so that's the law and the science and all this thing in America that's so bizarre. The one thing about when you talk to other entrepreneurs from other countries, like in Canada, they don't have these like stupid lawsuits. Like, I mean, we're not even talking about the science, and we're going to spend like $2 million to defend, like if we were a smaller company, we'd be out of, we'd probably be out of business, But because we're kind of a mid-sized company, You know, we're like, we got an X on our back, you know? So that's an example of your business. You really have to be careful about the laws, because the lawyers really run things in America. And it's not that way in Germany, it's not that way in Canada. It's like, it's out of control. And the trial lawyers give a lot of money to which political party? Does anybody know? Democrats. That's a big source of cash, and they make sure to. So these class action lawsuits should not be. I mean, if people are really doing damage, they should be some sort of redress, you know. But that's an example. Also, if you do business in California, there's a thing called independent contractors. You guys know what there's between an independent contractor and employees. So they're kind of going after Uber right now for that. They're trying to say they're employees, not independent contractors. So if they ever lose that case, they're gonna be in bad shape. Your Uber fare is gonna go way up. So we had someone who was an independent contractor. They worked at their house. We gave, you know, they could take off and go on vacation anytime they wanted to. You know, they made good money, and then they decided to go. And we let them go because we were changing technology systems. They were kind of managing Salesforce for us. And there's been a lawsuit. We're finally settling it, but we've been battling this for a year. They report us to like 7 different agencies. IRS says they're not an employee. Some state agency said, oh, maybe they are. Then another one said, well, we're going to pay, you know, all these forms, all this time. If we were in Texas, that wouldn't happen. If you're in Oregon, it wouldn't happen. In California, you know. And so we ended up paying them finally $55,000. You know, the crazy thing was I offered her $15,000. You know, just when she left, and I said, hey, here's $15,000. And we end up now paying all these attorneys, wasting all this time. So that's another example. If you're involved, you know, you really need to pay attention to HR law. So it's like, here, all I wanted to do was revolutionize the way the world eats. You know, start with 500 hemp bars. I mean, I think I took a business law class for, you know, like when I was maybe your age. But you have to be an expert in legal, financial, HR, sales, market. There's a lot of different things, you know. You know, and I think we probably spent over $4 million in legal fees in 16, 17 years as a company. So that's a lot to lawyers. Yeah. $4 million. Yeah. We also had some shareholders. So that's one of the challenges when you start to get shareholders. We had a shareholder that said, well, either you buy the shares back from us, because a lot of times when you grow this, you need to raise some capital. So they said, either buy our shares back at a price that we couldn't afford, and they say, if you don't, we'll just sue you. And again, this is this legal kind of issue and we have in America. So they sued me personally. They sued my board of directors, and they sued the company. So we had 3 different lawsuits, 3 different law firms. You know, and they made up all this ridiculous thing, all these claims, which the judges would throw out, and they would move to another jurisdiction. But you know, eventually we settled, but wasted a lot of time. You know, a lot of hassles, and we really didn't do anything wrong, but if you have enough money, and you have, you know, like it's kind of lawyers, guns, and money. So if you have enough money, you can mess with people through the court system, and so that's what they're, you know, that's what they try to do. So you can. So those are some of the challenges. Also, if you're an entrepreneur, you have to figure out what people are like. How good are you at like meeting somebody and saying, I could depend on this person or not in 2 meetings? How many, raise your hands, how many people are really good at that? Yeah, I thought I was pretty good at that, but I've noticed in corporate America, there are people who make like over $150,000 a year. The ones who are like under $100,000, they're either good or bad. You can find them, but there's this whole group of folks who get into these big corporations or medium-sized corporations, and they're just thinking, I just hope they don't find out. what I'm really doing. But, so they just really are good at kind of positioning themselves and, I was at this company, we did this. So the one thing is that the advice for hiring I tell people is, you want to spend more time in the hiring process, and then when you're ready to fire, you want to fire faster and hire slower, So I remember one person I hired probably cost over $1 million to the company. They did not match up between sales and production, and I was like trying to, okay, I'm taking the company to this level, I need to step back, don't want to micromanage them, want to give, they've had this track record, give them that responsibility, So finally let them go. The next person, and they were there about like 7 months, the next person in a different department was a marketing person, and in 17 days she was gone. Now we have some people who've been with the company for a long time that are really good, so I'm just giving you a few, that didn't work. But it's really good to take more time in the hiring process, and especially when you're starting out. If you only have if you're hiring 5 or 6 people, those 5 or 6 people. Now some of them may not be there over long term, but the better people that you hire at the start, you create that culture. And like after I let that one person in marketing go, a couple people said, if you didn't fire her, John, I was going to leave. My good people, they were didn't want to deal with that person, right? So it's, you have a responsibility. I mean, it's just like if you have a bunch of friends and you're going out to dinner for, let's say, with 6 or 7 people, and you're the person who brings somebody that's just being like an ass, right, or whatever, and your friends are going, why'd you bring this guy? Really, right? Doesn't that happen to you sometimes, yeah. Right? So when you're the entrepreneur, you're bringing the people to the party, and then this is part of the challenge also is, what do you do for people who are really high performer, but that aren't nice to people, have people issues? He's like one of your stars. Do you just fire him? But then if they're really driving sales or helping, so that's a balance. How do anybody have any suggestion if you had somebody on your team who's really a star in terms of performance, but they were having issues of how they treat the team? What would people do? Any suggestions?
Adjust their job responsibilities to have as little interaction as possible.
What if they have to interact with people a lot?
I don't know.
Yeah. So one thing is sometimes we've actually hired coaches. So you hire a coach to coach them to see if you can make some changes. The other thing is we have a program, and this isn't necessarily just from one person, but we have something called leadership training. So we had like an 8-week class where we would once a week people would come and learn on their skills, leadership skills. Yeah. How many people think they can don't need to improve your leadership skills? You guys are all great, right? So we all can improve, and that's one thing. As if you are going to be an entrepreneur and you're growing, you really need to work on your own leadership skills. And because ultimately, if you don't, when your business has challenges, that stuff is going to come out. I could get pretty upset. 12 years ago, if you took me 12 years ago and put me in the position today, it wouldn't be such a good thing. But over time I had to learn some of those things. How many people like to bring up uncomfortable subjects with their friends? People like to do that? Yeah, that's one of my challenges is sometimes, and I'm getting better at it, but it's like, let's say you hired someone and you go, they're doing pretty good, but you need to give them some feedback that maybe you could do this a little better, and they're not going to like that feedback. They're going to make you wrong for it. They're going to say you're a jerk, or they're going to be like, oh, why do you do that? like they'll start like, like you're like their mother or father, they'll get like really insecure. So we have to deal with those kind of people. So then sometimes you just go, I don't even want to, like, just like whatever. I'll go do something else. I'll go sell some more product or, go work in marketing. But if you don't deal with that, what happens? It can get worse. So that's a challenge, And then kind of confronting people with what's up, and partly it's just listening and and doing that. And then the other thing that's really important is to find out what are you good at and what are you not so good at. And also what don't you like. If you don't like to do certain things, you think that's good to have in your job description. So the things that I'm not so good at, I like to to get other people around me. So that's important. Is hire for people who are on your team. It's just like in basketball. If you're building a team, some people are really good at scoring, but they don't like to play. I mean, like James Harden. I don't know if you guys listen, basketball. Like James Harden's a great scorer for Houston Rockets. He doesn't like to play defense always so much, right? He's the guy who's scoring and rebounds, but so they got this guy, Patrick Beverly, that will guard the tougher guards, So that's an example. So you need to balance that out. Let's see. Is there any areas of business that you have that you're interested in that you'd like me to maybe focus in on? I've been kind of.
So I just had a question about like the firing and the hiring process.
Right.
Like, how do you determine whether it's like the balance between like talent development and like letting someone go? You know what I mean? Like whether it's that grace period where you just really need to ramp up someone and like they're just getting used to the new job versus like, okay, this person is actually just not going to cut it. How do you determine that line?
Yeah, that's a good question. First off, do you trust the person? So like if they're violating your trust and they're not communicating well, then that's kind of a red flag. Not returning emails. But if they're giving a good effort, and they have they want to do right, and then you just need to bring some skills. So I think it's a kind of an individual situation, but that's kind of to look at. I don't know if that answers your question. Anybody have anything?
I just have a question.
Okay.
I get so your story is interesting because you go from being a founder to now CEO, right?
Yeah.
CEO of a company that has, like you said, 115 employees, sells all over the world. So how did you transition? How did you find that transition from being a founder of a company that you're not sure if this is going to go well to now being, relatively successful?
Yeah. Right. I mean, we were undercapitalized. We almost went out of business multiple times, so that was and the other thing is that was, talk about a challenge that's kind of unique for our business. Most entrepreneurs have to deal with this, but when we started selling hemp bars, the DEA, the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration, didn't really like what we were doing. That was like 1999. So we had a hard time. Our products were made in Canada. It's illegal to grow hemp in the United States then. Today you can grow it under some research permits, so they're just starting to open up. So we couldn't get our product into the United States very easily, so we're having to deal with the border control. And then at one point, after 20 days after 9/11, the end of September 2011, the Bush administration published in the Federal Register that our hemp foods, or hemp bar, was in the same category as heroin, Schedule 1. And if we kept going, it would be either bankruptcy. If we kept going, we'd either go to jail, stop selling, go to bankruptcy, and so I'm kind of, kind of determined, I don't like to, if I say I'm going to do something, I'm not like, well, I'll just forget about that, a little stubborn. So I said, this is ridiculous, so we sued the Attorney General Ashcroft and won that case in 2004. Now we had some help with some friends, and Dr. Bronner's, anybody know Dr. Bronner's, the soap company, and Nature's Path, so. But we were doing like 15,000 a month at the time. We were a tiny little company, so we barely survived. Yeah, there's a lot of can be some challenges.
My question is like kind of related to that. Why do you like sort of companies like focus on the U.S. market when like you could have easily gone to like Europe or like Asia?
Yeah, yeah, good question. So we focus in the U.S. and Canada, and actually we're probably like maybe in the top maybe 60 brands in the U.S., but we're in the top 20 in Canada. So we're really kind of over strong in Canada as the U.S. We went to Canada, we went to Europe, and we do about $1 million a year in the UK. The challenge is we're competing with European entrepreneurs that it's hard to go to Germany and go, I'm an American, and I'm going to bottle my product in California, I'm going to ship it all the way to Europe, and I want you to buy my product versus from the German company that sells you sunflower or other products. So the Europeans have a kind of a home court advantage, and it's not one market there; it's multiple. We actually were the close. We set up we have actually a Dutch BV, which is so we have a business entity there, but we ended up not doing that. And there was also currency issues. So not only was the market harder, but the euro dollar, the dollar strong versus the euro. The euro's gotten weaker, so that makes it more expensive. So, and then in Asia, people were not so interested in health foods, 10 years ago, but we are on the Alibaba platform, and we do some in Korea, Japan. We do a decent amount in Hong Kong, and we're trying to get going in China. I'm a little disappointed. I thought I was optimistic about China a year and a half ago, and then we decided to switch our partners there, and that transition's been a little hard. So, but yeah, the Tmall is a really good. That's our platform, and so we're hoping we'll make a little more progress there. We are really strong also in the internet. That's one of our things. About 25% of our sales are web-based. And that's one of the strongest of any kind of CPG food company. We're one of the strongest in that. So we're really good at like Amazon. We do a lot of business on Amazon, and there's also if any of you if you have friends or family in other countries, iHerb ships our products all over the world, and they're based in California. One of the biggest companies that most people have never heard of. It's worth over $1 billion, and I remember my friend Rayo started. He had 36,000 square foot warehouse. He was paying maybe like $20,000 a month, back 10 years ago, and now it's over $1 billion valuation, $1.5 billion. But he just sells all over. He makes a deal with the Japanese postal service and just sends an airplane full of product like every couple days, and then they distribute it out. Yeah. So yeah, iHerb.com. You can check them out. Okay. Any other questions? Anybody? Any area of business? Maybe I'll talk a little about marketing. So, how many people think they understand marketing? A couple people. Okay. So, marketing is changed. I mean, in the past, the idea in business in America was to make a product that was really cheap to make. It's kind of like a non-tech business, product business, SKU, a widget or something. Make a product that's really cheap to make. Spend a lot of money in advertising to make it sound like it's really great, and have a big margin, and make it as cheap as you can, and then use like TV and print advertising. That's kind of the traditional way of marketing, and now with social media, though, if you make a shitty product, it's not as easy to hide, So, if you want to be good in marketing, first you want to be good in customer service and your quality and your manufacturing. So if you're operating really well, then it's much easier to tell that story, and you can let your customers share that. So there's the whole thing about branding and you know, what your logo looks like and your packaging, and those are all things. So, you know, we did a big packaging refresh with our company about 4 years ago. Some of you may buy our products, we used to have like a yellow label. And it was kind of a little dated, and we hired one agency and they didn't really deliver, and we finally got this other agency, and you know, now it's like a white background, and it was a really good change, but it, you know, cost us, you know, $150,000 and a lot of testing and things. So it's a big decision, you know, and they also tweaked our logo. Before, the logo was like in a horizontal, you know, kind of bar, and there was different colors in it, so we took it out of that and just made it simpler. So we've worked to do that. But I think if you, as being an entrepreneur, if you can find a solution to a problem that people have, whether it's a small problem or a large problem, and be that solution, you know, then you have a business opportunity. And if you can describe it in a way, you know, that's you know, a way that people can resonate, then your customers can be your evangelists, you know. You know, like for us, our big overarching is to revolutionize the way the world eats. So not only, you know, do we want people to buy more, you know, obviously our products, but we want people to buy more organic, whether they buy from us or not. You know, we want to see the soil improved, you know, so we tend to get involved in a lot of, you know, cause marketing. And so one of the things we do is we donate 1% of our sales. I think it's on by the way, we can have some little coconut candies for you guys. You can try. Yes, there's right here. So we donate 1% of our sales to groups that promote sustainable agriculture. We've given away over $4 million. So, like for example, when we came to the city of Richmond, we put in as an organic food company, and you know, we want to make an impact, not just say, hey, we're just going to come to the community, you know, make a bunch of money and leave or whatever. We made a commitment to put a fruit tree orchard, you know, at every school, and a lot of, you know, it's kind of a food desert. People in Richmond are, you know, underserved, economically challenged, and so they don't even have, like, there's not much health food stores. They don't have access to healthy foods, even supermarkets so much. So that's one of the things that we did there. And so now over the next few years, the tree's getting bigger, so they'll be producing, you know, thousands of pounds of fruit, you know, in the city there for people to try at the school and learn about that. So if you can align like a cause, you know, like, you know, how many, you've probably heard of Tom's Shoes, you know, so they like give a pair of shoes away with that. I mean, that's been a brilliant concept, and you know, he's made hundreds of millions of dollars on that. You know, part of our challenge as entrepreneurs, our business, we don't have high margins, so that's like we're constantly like, you know, how do we improve our margin to be profitable enough? But if you can align like something that your customers, I mean, that's a cool thing. Like if you buy shoes, people in places where they don't have any shoes, that's kind of a nice thing. People can get a free pair of shoes if you buy their shoes, right? I mean, different companies. I mean, like Chipotle, you know, had that whole thing, you know, about you know, the different way their food was grown, and then of course then they had that food problem, and you know, there's a lot. I'll tell you, a lot of people in the organic food world kind of scratch their head and go, how did they have like 4 or 5 of these food outbreaks? And they could never figure out where it came from, and they were all completely different in all these different locations around the country, you know. So you wonder what was there anything going on that, you know. But yeah, some of the different companies have that, you know, that kind of cause, and other companies don't need to be like, you know, Apple. I mean, what's Apple's cause, right? Apple's is just, you know, to think different or what have you. You know, they don't necessarily they didn't address that. That's more of just giving information to people, maybe the schools, things like that. You know, but I think that's important. And the other thing I'd recommend is in business. There's a lot of people who want to start a business. There's a lot of ads, so you want to be memorable. So it's like, I'd like to say the #1 rule in marketing is don't be boring. You know, even if you're not, like, maybe you can have a label. Some people look at it and go, this label this is not necessarily that great design, right? But if people like it, and I mean, or if people think it's kind of strange, or you know, it stands out, and then over time people like it. So because it was different. Or you could have this really pretty packaging, but it's just like everybody else, and then it's like boring, right? So, so you want to stand out. Like I think there's a product called Sir Kensington. Have you heard about that? They make what?
Ketchup?
Yeah, they make ketchup. I just heard they sold for like $150 million. So here's a company, we're selling more than they are, but we're not worth nearly as them because they come up with this really catchy little thing. All the products are non-organic, so they get the low cost of goods. They have this kind of, they're in some multiple categories. And who bought them? Unilever bought them, because Unilever has a big, you know, mayo category. So they have this, it's kind of like this old, like, kind of like 19th century kind of, you know, pen drawing of somebody. So, and it was just like, you know, Sir Kensington or whatever. It seems like, you know, it's kind of an old throwback or whatever, but it was different. If it was just kind of like trying to fit in or trying to be, you know, so that's an example of a really successful business, and they got a big paycheck at the end of the day, you know. And the other thing in business is you have to decide is, how much do you raise money? Do you just bootstrap it yourself, you know, with friends and family, or do you have to go outside to investors? And when you deal with outside investors, then you have to give up part of the company, and so that's a challenge, you know. So initially we funded most of it myself, but we were a tiny little company, and then I took some investors, you know, a few years later. So, and that's worked out pretty well with that group of investors. So yeah. Any other questions or anything?
That might be all the time we have,
Okay, good.
but thank you. Thanks for a great semester. If you have any questions, feel free to stick around, and yeah.
Yeah.